I'm joined today by James Fielding from Audeara. The ticker code is AUA. James, thank you so much for joining us today. Um, I'm really interested to know how Audeara came about. So you have a bit of an interesting career path by the look of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you started off in medicine as a doctor. Can you take us through your early career and how you came to found Audeara?
Yeah, sure. So my personal role in the story is that I couldn't pick between business or medicine, and so had the opportunity to do both and took that opportunity. When I started university down the road at UQ, I did business management and biomed science, and then was lucky enough to meet some very interesting people when I was traveling around the world and ended up spending some time in a New York hedge fund and at a casino in Vegas and really just sort of checking out what the big wide world was like. And I had a few different influences on my life. One side being very heavily medicine, both my parents are doctors, grandparents, doctors, aunts and uncles, all of that, but also had a really strong influence from my grandmother who was running her own hotel at the time. And I thought that was a pretty exciting thing to be doing. So I kept my options open and started exploring a bit more about the world, which led me to be in a New York hedge fund for the GFC and a few other interesting things, which got me, fairly well acquainted with what the world can look like if things don't go according to plan. And when I decided to go back and study medicine at UQ, I was then lucky enough to get a scholarship to do MBA studies at the same time. So I was put in a room with some really interesting people, and our job was to look at the world of medicine with a wider lens and see what we could do about it. And so, as junior doctors in our intern year at the Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital down the road from us here as well, we started a few companies, and it was absolute chaos, and we loved every second of it. And Audeara was originally designed to be a hearing test device that you would put in GP clinics, you would send out to regional remote communities, and it was a set of headphones that would go beep, and that was it. And we had an incredibly talented group of people around us at the time. My co-founder, Chris Jeffrey, a couple of people that had been working at Cochlear. We had some signal analysts from Boeing. We had all these interesting people that had found themselves in medicine with lives prior to the clinical side of things. And so getting a device to go beep was a pretty straightforward thing to be doing. But then we really got stuck into this idea of, well, now we know how you hear inside of headphones. Let's close the loop. Let's finish that cycle and transform the way those headphones sound based on your individual hearing profile. And when we were doing that back in 2014, 2015, we were it. There was a handful of murmurings from some other groups around the world, but the concept of personalized audio for entertainment was really us, and it was an incredibly exciting thing to be doing. To then really understand that while what we're making was super cool, there was a massive clinical impact for people that were suffering from hearing loss and had impacts to the hearing over time, whether it be workplace hearing loss, age-related hearing loss, disease-related hearing loss. And so they were coming to us saying, I don't think you understand how powerful this tech is. And we really got stuck into that. I suppose just coming full circle on the fact that people that were getting a real benefit from what we were doing was answering this real question of, can we make a solution that gives you a world-class listening experience regardless of what your hearing is like? And we really set about that and designing solutions that would be able to accommodate for any type of hearing loss, any type of hearing desire, anything you wanted it to sound like, anything you wanted it to be, anything you wanted it to overcome. All we care about is, can you hear what your headphone is trying to play for you? And if you can't, we'll take care of the rest. And that led us on a pretty exciting journey. And we're coming up on, well, we just had our 10th birthday, actually. We're heading into our 11th birthday in a few months. And the tech's obviously evolved, the platform's evolved, but it was really just trying to be part of the joyful side of somebody's hearing journey and getting people to pay attention and understanding that their hearing matters and that their hearing is individual, and that when they accommodate for that, they have a much better experience.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. I have a million follow-up questions. Firstly, I don't think I saw the Vegas casino on your LinkedIn, but maybe I just missed it.
Planet
Um,
Hollywood Resort and Casino, 2006, I think.
okay. Um, the GFC and like being with a hedge fund during the
Yeah,
GFC, that must have been
yeah, yeah.
wild. I mean, this
Yeah,
is
it's
a bit of a
hectic.
tangent, obviously, but can you take us
Yeah,
through that?
yeah, it was really amazing. And I was working in a distressed assets hedge fund, and it was a small crew, Park Avenue, fancy office, all the good hedge fund stuff. But the fundamentals of how this team worked and what they understood taught me an awful lot. And there was a lot to be understood around patience and understanding dips in markets and when to pile in. Because as a distressed asset hedge fund, um, it essentially became Christmas because there were a lot of businesses that were undervalued, not because of the core fundamentals of what the business was, but because of external market factors. And that created a whole lot of opportunity. And the leads in that hedge fund have gone on to continue to do pretty amazing things. And when I was sitting there and they were saying, "Oh, look, I'm losing about $1 million a day at the moment, but don't worry, it'll all come back." I was like, okay, and that sort of confidence and understanding that this is what markets do. This is how the world works. You get peaks, you get troughs. And when the world is on fire, you need to stop and figure out what you're going to do about it, not just run away. And so I thought that was a really interesting approach to, what is a pretty traumatic event for an awful lot of people. And they were looking at it with a pretty calm and measured response. And I thought that that was pretty cool. And then we went back and we were doing GFC analysis in accounting subjects and finance subjects at university, and people talking about all the different pieces of the puzzle. And it gave me a really interesting insight in how to approach these things.
Yeah, that's cool. Is there is there a particular day or is there a particular story that stands out for you in your memory?
Yeah, I mean, I got in and everyone was a little bit edgy because some of the headlines had started coming in. And then I was sitting there doing my work. I was doing analysis on US company financials, and my job at the time as a junior analyst was to take all the varying reporting styles that people chose and put them into our analytic framework, which actually also taught me a lot about what companies call different things and how it's beneficial in where you put things on your balance sheet, etc. Um, but we were sitting there, and my boss at the time just went, "Hey, James, check this out." And he had his feet up on his desk and everything was red. And it was just, free fall. And I was just like, "Oh, that doesn't look good." Yes, it is not good. But he was just sitting there. He's like, "We are a long-term player."
Yeah.
And then I started, checking it out, jumping online. And, the world is coming apart at the seams and everyone's freaking out. There's this article and that article and, end of days and this bank's closing. Or it's hectic. These guys are just like, it's going to be a long week. And it
Yeah,
was. And it
that
was
would have been
just,
interesting.
yeah, it was full on. Especially as you walk out of the building, everyone else is kind of a bit frantic, right? Because they don't have that patience. They're not structured that way. So a lot of people were uh, in a pretty tough spot.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, that sounds pretty like a pretty incredible experience to have gone through that. So, just some other things you mentioned that I wanted to touch on. You mentioned helping people to have their best hearing experience or something along
Mhm.
those lines, regardless of their kind of um, hearing ability and challenges. Do you think your technology is doing that? Is it achieving that goal now, or is it to what extent is it achieving that?
So our basic platform, our sort of bread and butter as an organization, are our TV listening headphones. We transformed a hearing test device into entertainment headphones and then transform that into TV listening headphones, which are then fully government funded, which is really amazing here in Australia. But yes, I do think we're getting that job done.
That's fantastic. It must be incredibly rewarding to get that feedback from people to say that you're changing their life for the better. Okay, there's one thing I wanted to ask you about, which it kind of flows on from what you've already talked about. But when I started to research the company, I became really aware, and I had some time to reflect on like connection and how hearing is important for connection. And like the motto of Audeara is "Feel connected your way." And I had some time to reflect on like memories from childhood of like my great grandmother who had hearing aids that probably didn't work all that well back then. And so her her kids and stuff would get upset at her when she couldn't hear. Like people would get frustrated, and I saw that a little bit with my grandmother as well, where it can really drive a wedge in between like people and really disconnect them from their families in particular. So yeah, it's such an important and critical thing. I guess in the same way that's excuse me, that sight is. Um, but yeah, it's such a valuable thing, and yet if you think about the money that flows into it from a medical and government perspective, it's probably not as big as a lot of other areas.
Yes, I think we're about 20 years behind, and it actually it's a bit frustrating, of course, and what we're trying to do is overcome this barrier to connection that people don't seem to realize or put enough emphasis on. And there's still this really stupid stigma and reluctance to engage in a hearing health solution for some really outdated belief that if you're doing something about your hearing, that's a sign of weakness. And I think we've gotten over that in a really long journey with glasses and then you know, physical aids of some description. If someone's wearing a knee brace or something, or whatever, it's so that they can get out and start walking around. Like, good on you, get out there, be active. And, Poindexter, Four Eyes, all that kind of stuff with glasses back when we were kids, that's not a thing now. People wear glasses even if they don't need them because they see them as cool and glasses are a fashion statement and all this kind of stuff. And the notion that you would go to the movies or go to a play or go to the theater or go to an art gallery and not wear your glasses is almost disrespectful to what you're doing. And in the same way that people who need hearing aids or need a hearing assistant of some kind and they're not using it when they need it because of this reverse idea that somehow people will think less of them when, as you quite rightly said, the frustration of not being able to communicate is the friction point. So when you're saying, hey, and you hear families, have different language for it, but put your ears on, have you got your aids in? What are you doing? Where are they? Can I charge them? But then people feel a bit like, oh, I don't want to cause a fuss. I don't want this to be about my hearing aids. But by not wearing the hearing aids or not using the tools, that has created the friction. If they just wore them, people would get on with their day and it wouldn't even matter. If you go to a lunch and you can't hear the person sitting next to you, so then you feel frustrated or you make a comment that's not quite right, and then that leads to a bit of reluctance to go out, and that leads to social isolation, that leads to disconnection from loved ones, that leads to dementia, cognitive decline. It's really bad. There's been a lot of research out there saying that hearing loss is the number one preventable cause of dementia and cognitive decline. So if you're talking about getting ahead on high quality life, part of that is high quality social interaction, part of that is keeping your brain stimulated, and it's, a muscle just like anything else, right? Use it or lose it. And if you don't keep putting enough stimulus in, then your brain starts to forget about needing to do those things, and it makes everything harder. And so, we try and offer solutions that are somewhat of a gateway to people that they think, oh yeah, I can do this. I might not be ready for hearing aids, but yeah, I could absolutely put some headphones on. And when we thought we were making really clever med tech and we're very fancy and we're scientists and we're all of this stuff, and at the end of the day, we stop husbands and wives arguing about how loud the TV is. That's what we do. And it's actually really beneficial to the joy people have in their lives, which is pretty amazing to think that a simple tool like this can actually really make moments nice and calm and enjoyable and bring the joy back by removing the friction that a hearing loss has caused in their relationship. And I think it's something that we just keep chipping away, keep chipping away, keep chipping away. You know, Apple have come out and said we have hearing loss compensation in our AirPods now. So there's this idea that if you have something in your ears, you might be listening to music, you might be using it to enhance your hearing. Who cares? The point is, are you using what you have available to you to make your experience better? And by doing so, make everybody else's experience better. And that's what we're aiming at. We're aiming at developing solutions that people can confidently use that just make their lives better.
Yeah, fantastic. And so just it might be worth us just explaining to some investors who aren't across the company, like a bit of a breakdown on your actual products. So you've obviously got the like broadcasters from that hook up to the TV. So you touched on that. You've got headphones, earbuds, but you've also got the technology side in terms of like the hearing algorithms and all that kind of stuff. Would you
Yeah.
mind just giving us a bit of a breakdown of like how you see the product segments that you've got and how in your mind you separate it all out?
Yeah, so the simplest way that we use to separate it is we have two business segments. One is Audeara, and that is Audeara-branded products that we manufacture, we sell predominantly into audiology clinics and also online. That's Audeara headphones, Audeara TV broadcasters, Audeara Auracast solutions, Audeara buds. And so that as a product suite is made up of all of the IP. And then we have what we call AUA technology, which is where we're dealing with third-party brands and third-party tech and licensing solutions. And the two are really quite symbiotic. So as we're developing new solutions for other people, that technology capability rolls itself down into the Audeara product suite, and everything we've learned from the Audeara products in terms of product market fit, size, scope, scale, features, all of those types of things can really inform what we then offer out to third parties. And Zildjian is a really great example of that. We're able to adapt our hearing check and our personalization algorithm, and then that goes into Zildjian headphones. And then we are the supplier now of Zildjian Perfect Tune headphones to one of the sexiest brands that's ever been, a 400-year-old symbol company out of the States. It's super exciting. But that capability came from running our own Audeara products. And now Audeara and AUA Tech are in this beautiful give and take relationship where everything just keeps getting better and better, and more people are getting excited about it. We have the audiology relationships from the Audeara branded side, and that's led to one of our real cornerstone announcements that we made, but our cornerstone shifts as a business of getting our tech platform authorized as a medical device to go into hearing aids into China. And that was an adaptation of our Audeara Bud platform, where we were then able to adjust it, make sure it meets the spec for the different market entrants, get all the compliance done, etc. But we took our consumer-facing technology platform, updated it, upgraded it, made it more powerful, and now it's the cornerstone of a hearing aid platform. And that's just going to keep going and going when we start providing solutions to the world's largest hearing aid companies. That sets us in incredible stead to be part of a long-term, really high-value journey that's really just started in the last few weeks, which has been super exciting. I mean, obviously, we've been working on it for years, but we finally got it ready to go, finally got it certified. And so now, the wheels are in motion to get that product out to hopefully hundreds of millions of people who need it in China. And then that serves as a platform for what we can do in the rest of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been a very exciting time. And I'm glad you started to discuss deals because that was going to be my next question. Um, you've had a lot of deals that have just kind of suddenly started to happen. And I'm sure you have been working on them for some time.
Mm.
Uh, has this come about as like a shift in focus in the business, like now that you're established with the hardware side, and the next obvious thing is licensing deals and that kind of thing? Or is it someone who came into the business that has added those skills of, selling into China in particular? Or where did this push come from?
Yeah, I'd say it's a bit of both. So we were really focused, especially after listing, we went out, we chased a lot of shiny lights, and it was growth at all cost, and then it was growth at appropriate cost, and then it was growth at no cost, and then it was cash flow is all anybody cares about. So tighten up and, let's really get back to basics. Okay. So we sort of shifted what we were doing as a business pretty massively. And then we brought into the business a guy called Bill Payne, who sits as our COO and sits on the board and is one of our largest investors to date. And he has an incredibly strong foundation in Taiwanese and Chinese manufacturing capabilities and very strong networks. And he's been around since we secured the Zildjian contract, then into the Clinico Buds contract into Taiwan, and through our relationship with EaseTech, that sits as the cornerstone of both of those from a manufacturing point of view, that's led to EaseTech really understanding what our capability is to enhance their solutions that they're offering out to their customers. And that then led to the hearing aid side of it, and now to this Optech deal that we just talked about. Optech, one of the largest system on chip providers, and they're excited about what we can do and excited about how our technology is going to enhance what they're offering to people. And it certainly came from us having a bit more freedom to think outside of the bread and butter. And the team here in Australia, led by John Krajewski, Rob Paulson, Rebecca Davidson, and Simon, they're out there on top of the core of the business. They've really taken ownership, which is let Bill and I go out and get these deals, and Alex Affleck, our CTO, we sit down and we have these strategy sessions. And, I made a little post a couple of days ago that when we first started, when I shook hands with someone, I thought, Monday, let's go. Like, this is fantastic. And they're thinking 24-month product cycles and strategic rollout trajectories, and let's touch base in 6 months and see how everything feels. And we had a lot of growing up to do to be comfortable being a bit more patient and seeing these deals come to fruition.
Okay, so we've just talked about some of
We're
the
talking
deals.
about, yeah, we're talking about bill paying and deal flow and how we're able to shift our focus towards securing more of a pipeline on the AUA tech side, because the Audeara side has had some real ownership from some of the team members internally and set a really strong foundation, which lets us, leverage up and put more energy into the AUA tech side, which we think will have a huge upside. I mean, uh, there's a room to grow here in Australia, but we've been pretty consistent in the narrative that the Audeara side of the business in Australia is sort of a bedrock, and it'll continue to grow, but it's not going to, go 10x overnight. But the AUA tech side has that capability. Some of these partners we're talking to, some of these opportunities that we're talking about, if they are as good as we think they'll be, or as good as the partners think they'll be, then the upside is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, so I wanted to get a sense for that from you, because some of these deals look like they have a lot of potential. So I wanted to get your take on that. So in particular, like East Tech, obviously China's a big market, so um, there's a potentially high total addressable market there, big total addressable market. But the one that looks really exciting to me, and the market also has reacted really well to, is obviously Optech. Optech has customers in like Sony, maybe not Sony, Sharp, Philips, Panasonic, Toshiba, companies like that. So,
and they're just the ones on their website for context.
okay, sure, okay, that's there's something that we don't know. Okay, so with Optech, well, let's start with that deal because that's the most recent one. I think it's really exciting. So, do you think your hearing algorithm is going to be in like Panasonic and Philips headphones soon? Is that where this is going? Or yeah.
Well, according to the market clarification I had to make today, the immediate impact of the revenue still remains uncertain, but that's our goal. Our goal and our target is to have partnered with a solution provider who has access to these partners and for them to be encouraging those partners to use our tech to enhance their solutions. And that tech has expanded as well, which is super cool. You know, when we think about an optimum listening experience in our world, in Audeara world, that means a personalized listening experience where you're in control of how your world sounds. And when we look at some of these opportunities on the licensing side, you know, a lot of it's noise reduction algorithms and media personalization algorithms, hearing profile compensation algorithms. So it's gone beyond do a hearing check, change the media. We're really starting to broaden our scope into optimizing a listening experience in a few different ways, which gets us out of headphones and earbuds and gets us into pretty much anything that makes noise, which is super exciting. And that's why we were pretty happy about it. And then it turned out the market was pretty happy about it, even though we were very clear that, hey, we've set this framework, here's the plan. You know, it's yeah, we look forward to when the opportunity turns into purchase orders, and we feel pretty excited about what those will be when they come to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a follow-up question on that, like you talked about your tech being used used by those big brands, for instance. So, will your technology just replace an existing piece of software, or will your or algorithm, or will your technology like dramatically improve products from Panasonic and Philips and big names like that?
So the tech platforms that we're talking about are not currently a default that you would have in these solutions. So yes, we think by embedding them into these offerings, you're really transforming what they're capable of doing.
Okay. And are you able to shed any light for investors on like the revenue model that you're working with there? So it's a licensing deal.
Yeah.
Can you talk
So
about like the cost per chip or anything like that?
no, we can't. And it's one of
Okay.
those things that for commercial sensitivities, I think investors would understand that we don't want to be benchmarking one person's utilization of the platform versus another person's utilization of the platform, whether it be which pieces of the algorithm they choose, what their scale is. So we don't want to be hamstringing ourselves in any future negotiations. And likewise, Optech wouldn't really be happy knowing having their customer set knowing what they're paying us versus what they're paying other people. So we try to
Sure.
keep that under wraps. But if you look at audio codec optimizations, so if you look at an international data set of what people currently pay to have really high-end audio algorithms in their solutions, we're in that kind of ballpark, and the view is gross margin directly to us when people put the chip into their solution and activate our tech in it. We get our fee every time somebody uses that chip, and the goal is scale. So the
Yeah.
goal is, you know, starting to partner with people that think about things, you know, in hundreds and thousands of units. And that's the kind of scale that we're hoping for by partnering with a group like Optech who have channels to be dealing with scale like that. And once the tech platform is built on a licensing model, we're then able to sit and have that just drop straight to the bottom line.
Yeah,
Which is
so
really
you
cool.
would be have gross margins, getting very close to 100% essentially. Yeah, because it's just a piece of software that someone else is using. Yeah, which is really exciting,
Correct.
right? Because for investors, I'll get into we can get into financials and cash flow in a little bit, but obviously small businesses, particularly manufacturing businesses, cash flow is a constraint, and Audeara has still been burning some cash in like the operations side. So what for me as an investor, what this deal brings is like the scope for unconstrained upside. Like you don't have to feed it; it's just going to take off on its own if it is going to take off. You're not going to have to pump heaps of money into it. You've already got the deal. You don't need to sell it anymore. You don't need to sell each unit. You don't need to manufacture it. Let's just quickly touch on some of the other deals.
Sure.
Clinico, East Tech, we kind of touched on. Do you have a sense for how big the hearing aid market is in China?
Yeah, I mean, some of the numbers are about 450 million people would need a solution. I think it will be ambitious for us to think we're going to get every single one of them, but obviously, we expect the volume of units to be orders of magnitude higher than what would be capable here in Australia. So when you look at the partners we have and the opportunity, yeah, we're talking about a scale that's pretty hard to measure in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think we're talking about e-commerce channels in an e-commerce market with medical devices with a highly credible brand on them. And that's a very exciting opportunity for us. We wouldn't be doing it if we didn't believe it was going to be paying us back tenfold.
Okay. Yeah, the e-commerce like channel to market, I guess, in China seems to like it's definitely different to here, and it seems to be much more robust, much more of a just integrated part of people's lives.
Yeah, it's just I think integrated is a really good way of putting it. It's simply the way it's done. And there are, of course, a handful of, large, beautiful cities that have large retail sectors and all those sorts of things. But at scale, and, when you're talking about the extraordinarily large middle class who are now having that purchasing power, it's all e-commerce.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move into the financials. I'm wary that we've wasted a lot of time on technical issues, which has been a lot of fun, but it hasn't led to very good
haven't we learned
conversations.
a lot?
Yeah, we have learned. I've learned. So, just before we get into financials, the Optech deal is not exclusive, right? So you can go and talk to other companies about licensing your technology. Are you having discussions at the moment? Are there any other big names that you're approaching? Anything you can talk about?
Not that I can talk about with the big names in there, but we have used language like AUA Tech has a strong pipeline of opportunities. And if you see me on a plane, I'm not going because I'm trying to get away from my kids. I'm going because there's somebody there that I think it is worth being away from my family to talk to. And that's sort of an indicator of why I go to these different places and what I'm trying to do when I get there.
Excuse me, the cough is coming back to haunt me. So you're a good father as well. That's what we can also take away from this conversation.
That's the goal. I'm trying to do all things in all ways, but you can never find balance. You can only ever be balancing, is what I keep telling myself. But with tech, the idea that, I mean, as we found today, I've been in the middle of Tokyo and had better video calls with my daughter than I have trying to do a Teams meeting from two Brisbane-based people. So there are often nice moments of connection that can also just seem a bit stronger as well. If I'm sitting in my cheap and nasty Tokyo businessman hotel room, and then sitting there, and my kids are just telling me all about their day and showing me their stuff. And, there's a really nice sort of unbroken focus there, which is pretty
Mm.
cool. And I'm never that far away. They can always jump on and call me. And if I'm
Okay.
around, I'll answer. So
So the next deal is coming from Tokyo, is what I'm taking away from this.
I have been 5 times in the last 12 months. So
Okay.
there are a lot of opportunities. We did actually announce one of the first movers in that space, which was for some of our accessible audio tech and our Auracast transmitters. So that was getting our distributor, who's off to the races with our Auracast little transmitters, which is cool. And so that's setting a bit of a foundation as everybody else comes along. Like I said, in my nice patience focused LinkedIn post, which does use most of my brain power to sort of accept it, that they move a little bit slower than I might like. But it's because they're deliberate, and then when we get to the end, it's more than worth it. So yeah, we're
Yeah.
feeling pretty good about that as a space.
Yeah, yeah. It is interesting the way different cultures kind of deal with deal making and stuff like that and commercialization. So yeah,
Mm,
Japan would be very different to China, I'm sure. Um, let's jump into the financials. So
sure.
September, I think 1.2 million in cash at the end of September, which is obviously not much money, but you guys do run pretty excuse me, do run pretty frugally on your cash burn. So I think you burnt $338,000 in operating activities, and you've since had some R&D rebates come in at 1.22 million. We have seen this steady ramp up in revenue over the last, well, few years, maybe 4 or 5 years, where your revenue's just kind of slowly, steadily been increasing. You're now doing all of these licensing deals. So how are you seeing cash at the moment? Do you think you guys will need to raise in the next 12 months, or do you think you're going to be cash flow positive soon?
I would love to be able to confidently answer that question for you, but I'm told I am not supposed to.
Okay.
But as the world sits now, we feel pretty good about things. And if we do come back to the market, it'll be for a really good reason, because we're chasing a big opportunity and we need to get after it with more capital than we have available to us at the time. So yeah, we're feeling pretty good about things. And I think when those deals start to come in, I've been saying recently that a lot of the opportunities sort of come a bit staged out. We might have one big hit per quarter, one big win. And as they start to stack up on top of each other, then the cash flow stops becoming an issue. So our goal is to really start bringing in those opportunities so they're landing more frequently, and then we'll be there. And as you said, we run pretty tight and we're pretty darn close to where we need to be getting it done. So a few of those things happening sooner rather than later makes us feel pretty confident about where things are.
Yeah, and it like the way these deals are landing now does make it look like FY26 or potentially more like FY27, but you might be seeing FY26 as a bit of a breakout year, or at least the back half of FY26.
Mm,
Like it's pretty exciting. So if I guess there are certainly plenty of cases where big deals are struck and nothing happens, but you're already seeing some big orders come through on some of
mm.
these deals.
Yeah, because
And
we also, for the sort of bedrock of the business, our trading update a couple of weeks ago was letting people know that essentially we've hit last year's number already on the Australian wholesale side, and we still had 7 months of trading to go. So we're feeling pretty good about that from our big customers coming in, placing nice big purchase orders. And what we love about those is similar to what you were talking about before with that cost of customer acquisition. When people come in and they buy in big hits, it really streamlines the rest of our activities. We can put perhaps more energy into other partners and sort of shift things around to really try and maximize what this year can be, knowing that, you know, we set ourselves some pretty lofty goals, but then we've hit them pretty early, which is great. And then, we get to really just hammer down for the next 6 months. And looking at things on a calendar year cycle versus a financial year cycle can also be quite handy, considering the flows that our main customers tend to have, which is on a calendar year cycle. So, yeah, I think there's a few nice metrics there that show that the revenue side of it's really under control, and then getting the cash flow side to be in keeping with that means that we'll be okay.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's talk longer term then. So at the moment, you get these good deals coming in. Where do you see, excuse me, where do you see the company going like over the next 5 years? What's your strategic plan? Are you going down this licensing path full throttle? Are you looking at other products? Give us a bit of an overview of where you can see the company going over the next few years.
So we see the Audeara piece in Australia as the bedrock continuing to grow, being nice and strong there. We have a handful of these opportunities that can bring new technology into the Australian market. So one of those is with shops here, which we talked about as a research partnership with Ear Science out of Perth. So that's deploying education solutions to kids in regional remote and then kids with hearing challenges throughout the Australian education system. And that's a really big opportunity to be expanding into a new segment, but still within our hearing health kind of home base. We're talking about improving listening and connection experience for kids in the schools. That's obviously going to be a big one. It's a big job. It's a big technical job. But then, when it comes good, that's going to be super exciting. And then what we're seeing is the global side of the audiology business on the Audeara side starting to take a really good look at some of our Auracast solutions and our Bud solutions and what that means from a technical point of view. So I'm hoping that over the next 5 years, the Audeara side will have its bedrock in Australia, but start to really plant some foundation internationally with the audiology groups. That's the pretty clear strategy there. We have a pull into other markets, having them actually come good on those commitments is a big focus for us, which we have to be aware of with a resource point of view. We can't just be throwing boots on the ground into every country where people say there might be an opportunity, because that's just not how we're doing things. And so we hope to be steadily progressing the international footprint there. We're starting to see some good interest from the optical groups. So this idea that the hearing channel is no longer just audiology groups. You're seeing groups like Luxottica investing in opportunities like Nuance Audio. You're seeing the Facebook Meta glasses. You're seeing this merging of eyes and ears together. And that creates a nice opportunity for us because obviously as a hearing provider and as an entertainment solutions provider, we can start to explore which form factors are going to work best in an expanding hearing health channel. So you start talking about all the big global optical players wanting to have a piece of the hearing puzzle and us being a really great crossover in that space, especially when you walk into an optical channel, average age is about 45. You walk into a hearing channel, average age is about 75. If you're walking into an optical store as a 45-year-old, 70-year-old is still a bit iffy about whether they want to do something about the hearing. So how do you give someone that kind of gateway drug, that introductory way of saying, hey, my hearing matters and I'm going to do something about it? And how can you provide that solution to an early demographic and really take a run at getting on the ground floor of someone's hearing health journey? That's a big strategic piece for us to see if we can take on that challenge. And then you look at all the tech licensing and that'll just keep going. It'll be, how do we find opportunities? How do we double down? How do we find a way to ensure that the tech solutions we're offering stay relevant, stay cutting edge, and stay desirable as people try to improve what their product's capable of? So in 5 years' time, I think the goal from our point of view is to have AUA tech essentially kind of eclipsing what Audeara is able to do, because we found really high volume, high value partnerships, and we're on a good pipeline to be doing that and delivering on that.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense to me. Like the channel synergy there of like if you had an optometrist that was getting people in their 40s, and then that becomes a customer for life, and you've got that exposure to the next kind of technology that people will need, which is hearing technology. That makes a lot of sense. So excuse me. So do you like, how do you see the relative opportunities? Like for me, the domestic thing, okay, that sounds great. It's the bedrock of the company. But for me, I see the big opportunity being those overseas licensing deals. Is that how you see it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I think everyone's really on board with the power that these international opportunities have. But I think it's important not to discount what the domestic opportunity can be. If we start to expand into new areas, if we start to reach the capacity that we know is there, at the moment we're servicing probably about 30% of the government funded opportunity that's in front of us here. And, when you look at what that means for top line revenues and the position we have in the Australian audiology space, if we're able to really encourage and promote the audiology groups, putting a bit more focus into some of these other government funded opportunities that are really just there for the taking. There's a lot of people that could use the assistance and use the help, and there's a lot of support for it. It's really just a matter of business priorities at this point. And so that keeps us very confident that there's a lot of upside left at home. And it's also, considering the structures we have, a really cost-effective way to get some growth as well.
Okay.
But
that makes
yes,
a lot of
I
sense.
agree. AUA tech is shiny, it's sexy, it's big, it's global, it's licensing, it's everything.
Yeah.
If we get 1 million hearing aids a month, then that obviously transforms who we are as a business, right? And so those kind of shoot the lights out type opportunities that we're hunting for and we're hoping for are there. And we're giving ourselves the best chance of taking them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, James, I'm just wary of time because we've probably taken up more than your time than
You're
I
cutting
wanted
into
to.
my Polish club lunch, so I will have to actually duck out for an hour.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So, is there anything else you wanted to share about the company? Any other thoughts you wanted to leave investors with?
Oh, I just think the engagement we've had from the investor side over the last 6 months has been great. And, we are around. I am a real person. If you want to know more about the company like you did, Izaac, just reach out. If I have the time, giving it to people who want to know more about the business is obviously a big part of what I do. So we're around, and if you want to learn more, just ask. But stay tuned. I think we're onto a pretty good thing.
Perfect. I agree, James. I think the current situation that the company is in, the current opportunity is massive. So I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today and let our investors know about the company. And thank you for putting up with all the technical issues we've had today. It's been a lot of fun. And yeah, I really look forward to following the story, and good luck for the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Talk to you soon, mate.
Yeah, thanks, James.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.